Hello, friends, neighbors. I mean, maybe you're my neighbor. I don't know. Maybe you live next door to me. You don't really know. I mean, maybe you do. You probably do if you live next door to me, honestly. Hello, today, this is one of two end of year videos that I'm making. This one is my favorite albums that came out this year, and the other one is my favorite games that came out this year, and that'll be out like a day or two after this video. So I don't know what days those are, but whatever day it is, hope it's a good one. So anyway, here's what we're going to do. I have 5 honorable mentions that I want to mention because a lot of fantastic music came out this year. One of the best years for music we've had in quite a while, actually. I want to go through those and give you like a little brief snippet of why I like those, and then we're going to get into our top 5. But then I also want to mention that excuse me, that this top 5, the order of the 5 is the order. It is, of the 5, the number 1 is my favorite album that came out this year, and so on and so forth. But the order really doesn't mean anything to you, and the reason why I say that is because everyone has different tastes, everyone has different preferences, and the difference between number 2 and number 1, or number 5 and number 1, or number 3 and number 4, or any of that, it doesn't really mean anything, because they're all fantastic. Even the honorable mentions here are fantastic, and in my opinion are worth listening to. And then in addition, if there are things that I mention on here that you just despise, then that's fine too, because we all have our different opinions, and I think the healthiest thing to do is just talk about it. Talk about why we like these things, why these things matter to us, and go from there. It's easy to be like, objectively, this is terrible, and you have terrible taste if you don't like this, but really it doesn't matter. If you like the Eminem album that came out this year that I think is garbage, then good. Great, glad you like it. I don't, but I'm glad you do. So really, that's all it comes down to. So with that, let's get into the honorable mentions here. I have 5 of them. So sorry about that. I'm going to close Discord here so we don't get any more noises we don't need. I don't know why I didn't do that before. This is a professional production here, folks. The first honorable mention I want to talk about is Brockhampton's Saturation 3. And thankfully, this is another one of those albums that came out similarly to when Eminem's Revival came out. So it was one of those projects that I could listen to make up for the fact that I was disappointed with Revival. But they released 3 projects this year. All are fantastic, but the third is my favorite of the bunch because I think it takes the most risks. I think the cool thing about Brockhampton is just how many of them there are. They're all young. They're all full of life. They're all full of energy. It just brings me back to the days, and not brings me back like I lived then, but it makes me think back to all of those artists in the early 90s that were all like collectives like Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, NWA, like all these collectives of people coming together. And then those groups came together and formed even bigger collectives of things that defined their region of hip-hop in a way. And obviously, regional hip-hop isn't as much of a thing as it used to be because of how more, connected we are with the internet and stuff like that. But either way, I like how big of a collective they are and how varied the music is here, so I like that one. Next, I want to mention Dying Fetus's Wrong One to Fuck With. Definitely, I think this is the best Dying Fetus album, but it's just very aggressive, very unrelenting and powerful, and I think despite that, it also doesn't sound fuzzy, because I think one thing that a lot of death metals run into, especially in recent years, and it kind of did that before too, but I think it's kind of come back as this resurgence of stuff, is that it's supposed to sound dirty, right? It's supposed to sound messy. But Dying Fetus on this record sounds surprisingly clean and tight, but yet equally aggressive and unrelenting and powerful. So full recommendation there. Next one's Everything. Everything's a Fever Dream. It's just it's just a solid follow-up to what came before. I really can't say anything specific about it because it just, it does what the last album did, just more of it and better, in my opinion. So I really don't have any specifics to say about this. I feel like there are people that are bigger Everything fans than me that probably have more to say about this album than I do. But it was just a really solid listen. I really enjoyed it. And it wasn't really until this year that I got into Everything. So it's something that I kind of should go back and listen to their older stuff and see how they got here, because this new recent album really does feel like it justifies the title. It's just kind of It's a really solid dance pop kind of situation here. It makes you want to get up and move to the music, and it just consistently catchy, consistently lively. Next one, RTJ3. Motherfuckers. No. No, RTJ3 came out last year, technically. It released on streaming services on Christmas. But the physical release came out this year, so I feel justified in putting it on here as an honorable mention. This is my favorite of the Run the Jewels albums, because I think while in some ways it's kind of more accessible than their previous two albums in terms of how it sounds, how it's produced, I also think it's more not angry, but more heavy hitting, and it kind of in that aspect of the production kind of reminds me of earlier LP stuff, which I like more than Run the Jewels personally. I really like the production here. This is also the first time in Run the Jewels that we really see LP actually rap well. And I don't mean that he didn't rap well before, but I think he really stands out here. It's kind of like you could listen to the first two albums and be like, okay, this is Killer Mike killing it, and then LP killing on production. But you don't really see LP on the mic, dominating with killer verses like he does on this album. So I think that's a good thing as well. And last honorable mention, something I really didn't expect to throw on here, Jay-Z's 444. The reason why I didn't expect to put it on here is because I'm not a Jay-Z fan. I have not really listened to a lot of his music, but I was pressured by someone to watch the music video for The Story of OJ, and wow, that music video is powerful, and wow, that song is fantastic. So I listened to the full album, and it's just consistently really, really solid. It's a short project, but it feels like no time is wasted on here. Also, given how much I like the Beyonce record that came out last year, Lemonade, I thought it was I thought it was cool. Like, this record is sort of not a response to her record necessarily, like it's some sort of like combative thing, but it's sort of Jay-Z taking responsibility. Personal responsibility for what's going on here. So people that are into the whole like celebrity drama thing, get their satisfaction. But I think the consequence of this that I do appreciate is that there's a vulnerability to this album that you don't see a lot in the, super popular hip hop artists nowadays, that I really came to appreciate with this album. So finally, we're at the actual top 5, 8 minutes in. Let's get into it. So I mentioned I hate the Eminem album that came out, and it's not his worst, but it's just not good. And instead of crapping on that some more, we're going to talk about an album that released the same day that's better than it, which is the new Nerd album, No One Ever Really Dies. If you didn't know, that's actually a self-titled album, because Nerd actually stands for No One Ever Really Dies, which it's kind of cool how it's laid out on the little tongue album cover there, because you can see the nerd go down like the side. The strength of this guy really is, because I'm not a fan of Pharrell, right? I'm just not. I think most of the things that he does just are, and maybe just not for me, right? Like, I'm not saying he's bad, it's just not for me, okay? But the thing that makes this project stand out so much to me, first off, the best thing that Pharrell's done, in my opinion, is all the Nerd projects, right? But on this thing here, it feels like he's taken all the experience he's had through producing all sorts of crazy other things, and bringing it into this project. So what you would consider to be like, some people label Nerd as something like funk rock, or some people label him as like R&B, and some maybe would call it hip hop. But the thing that's interesting about it is it kind of fuses all these different styles and production things into it to make something that just exciting and consistently interesting, and changes things up a lot. You have a track like Lemon, right? This first hit track, and it just sounds like an EDM pseudo trap, but not fully trap. The kind of thing you would hear in a club, right? But then you have something like, I want to say it's ESP, where it's like this kind of like swaggery, like funk jazz kind of situation, where it's like da 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 and da 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 da. Like, I think that might be Don't Do It actually, but either way, solid album all the way through, and I like how I keep changing things up. throughout, and it's probably the best thing Pharrell's done in his career, in my opinion. So that's good. It's a good album. You should listen to it. Best tracks. I'm confusing Don't Do It with ESP, but I'm just gonna say they're both the best tracks because they're both good. And I like the Kendrick feature on Don't Do It. So even if I'm confusing the main part of the song with ESP, it's fine because the Kendrick feature is good anyway. Moving on. Number 4, thrash metal legends, Overkill, been around for forever, but they really kind of hit a resurgence back in 2012 with what is it called? I'm going to get destroyed in the comments by people who know Overkill. The Electric Age, killer album. Electric Rattlesnake is something that I've played in the car consistently and just jammed out to, because it's just, that chorus, refrain, hook, whatever you want to call it, more than you can take, make no mistake, electric rattlesnake. It's just awesome. It's just aggressive. It's so good, and I love every track on that album. But the thing was, I was expecting this because even White Devil Armory was just as consistent and just as good, right? But it just didn't feel as great or great. I just said great twice. It didn't feel as great because it felt like the same album again, right? And that's what I was kind of worried about with the Grinding Wheel, which came out this year, is that it would feel like the same album again. And to be fair, the tone is the same, the approach is the same, it sounds very similar, but I feel like this is, just like the album cover itself, which is really tight, grinding gears coming together, it's very tightly done, and I think this is the most, there's no down points on this album, but what the big strength here is that it, instead of just being consistently like in your face aggression that a lot of thrash metal is nowadays, it balances this like thrash metal aggression with this sort of like heavy metal power ballad sound that you remember nostalgically from like the 80s and 70s. So some of the best parts of these songs are actually the slower parts, where it just kind of slows the beat down, but has that like power, like, raise your fist in the air, get the metal horns up, oh, wow, that kind of stuff. So I really like this album because it sort of has that balance there, and through that, it just kind of, it feels like you're at this live show, where it's like they want the audience to like kind of chime in at certain points, and I really want to see them play some of these songs live, but I just haven't had the opportunity to see Overkill live yet. So anyway, I really, really like this album. Best tracks, honestly, probably the tracks that everyone else is going to say, Mean Green Killing Machine and Our Finest Hour. Those are the two singles that actually released before the album released. I believe Mean Green Killing Machine was released. I know Our Finest Hour was, but I believe Mean Green Killing Machine was. But those are both fantastic tracks. But the entire album is just consistently great. So that's that. Let's move on to different kind of artist, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. Now, I was actually this band was first brought to my attention this year because they were going to do this crazy thing. They were going to release 5 albums in 1 year. And now, the more I looked into it, it's still ambitious, don't get me wrong, but King Gizzard is a very prolific group, right? They released, I think, 2 albums in 2016, I want to say, something like that. So they've been, this isn't the most ambitious, if it was a different band, then it would have seemed far more ambitious than it is. But that doesn't change the fact that if you're going to release 5 albums in a year, like there's got to be some stinkers in there, right? But there isn't. Like, all of them are really interesting and captivating and good. I mean, I would say that there are some that are better than others, of course. But they're all interesting. Even the jazz record was interesting. Like, I wouldn't expect that one to be interesting. It was, but I'll enjoy it. The second album that came out this year, Murder the Universe, this freaking crazy concept epic where there's like 3 different stories they're told, and they all have like 9 tracks or so each, and it's like, whoa, what's going on here? And all the tracks blend into each other in true King Gizzard Wizard fashion. So that was awesome. Then you have Polygon Land, which is the most recent one, because we still haven't heard the 5th one yet, but it's probably still going to come out this year because they said they don't break any promises. Polygon Land was also really interesting, and it's probably their tightest album. They kind of throw in all of their experiences from all their different albums into that in a really cool way. And so they just had some really solid tracks. But the one that stands out to me is the first album that came out this year, Flying Microtonal Banana. And it's certainly a banana, if you know what I mean. That didn't even mean anything. So the thing with this album, and they do actually play with microtones in other records of theirs that came out this year as well. But the concept behind this is that what they say on the back, and I don't have the CD in front of me because it's in the car because I keep listening to it, is that this album is wrong. And when they say it's wrong, they mean it's like it's not tuned to the way that music that you listen to is normally tuned. These guitars are tuned to microtones, which is the sounds in between the conventional notes that you would see on a piano, right? So they're tuned differently. And it sounds off, and it sounds out of tune, and it sounds weird, and it sounds foreign. But if that's intentional, if that's the sound that they want to make, then is it wrong? Is there any sort of thing as a wrong note? And that's something that I've argued before, is that, especially in the music school that I, live near, and I'm actually getting a minor in music in this music school, is that, like, they stress so much this note accuracy and, these very traditional sort of chord structures and things like that, and that you need to map things out in a particular way. And there's certainly a benefit to that. But the thing is that viewing something as wrong kind of stifles creativity. And I mean, that's the approach King Gizzard took with this album. But this isn't just some crazy experimental nonsense, right? This isn't unlistenable in favor of experimentation. In fact, this is some of the most catchy and captivating and interesting rock music that's come out in quite a long time. The first track, Rattlesnake, is like 8 minutes, right? And most of the track is just them singing Rattlesnake again. Rattlesnake, 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 rattlesnake. It's literally that over and over again. And of course there's verses and there's different stuff, and then it cuts out and they groove on. But it's so killer. Like it's 8 minutes of the same riff, and it never stops being interesting. That's hard to do. So anyway, I freaking love this album. That track is great, but then each track fades into the next, right? And it flows in an interesting way, but yet it has this crazy diversity to it. So you have a track like Rattlesnake, which hits really hard. It's not like heavy metal levels or anything like that, but like it hits pretty hard. Then you have Melting, which is this very almost uncomfortable, unsettling. How do I explain it? It's just it's almost haunting in a way. And so you go through this track list, and it's just every single track is different from what comes before it, but yet it all flows together so nicely in a way that you could just keep listening to this thing on loop. It's not Nonagon Infinity where it actually does loop, but you get what I'm saying. Fantastic album. I think this is King Gizzard's best album, but that's obviously very debatable. It's just a really, really solid album, and I heavily recommend it to you. Let's move on to number 2, which is the best metal album that came out this year, and it's Power Trip's Nightmare Logic. It's their sophomore record, and unlike something like Overkill or even the Dying Fetus album, where it sounds clean in a way that makes it maybe more approachable, but just the cleanliness of it is kind of a benefit to it. Power Trip kind of goes in the exact opposite direction, and that doesn't mean that their sound is dirty in a bad way. It's not like they recorded it in their garage intentionally to make it sound bad, you know what I mean? And there's also benefits to that too. So like I said, there's no such thing as wrong, right? But the benefit with Power Trip is that their music is it's called Nightmare Logic. So the goal of the album in that sort of sense is to consume you with darkness, right? They want you to feel the weight of this nightmare that they're painting with their lyrics and their sounds and so on and so forth. And the way they do that is they just make the music as dense as possible. So instead of it being there being like gaps between like the lead guitar and the rhythm guitar and the bass, that kind of thing, is everything just kind of fills this entire sound spectrum and just weighs upon you in this in this way that it's almost like it's nightmarish, obviously, but it's almost stressful. And I don't mean that in like it's hard to listen to, because you keep listening to it and it's very very exciting and very haunting, but it in some ways it just feels like a lot. You know, and that's the best way to describe it. It just feels like a lot. The true weight of what they're trying to do here is felt through how they build their sound with this. That's the best way to explain it. I don't freaking know, but this album's fantastic, and it's something genuinely different from the thrash metal scene, which honestly, aside from some of the more progressive stuff like Vector, like we haven't really seen something that sounds different from the likes of, you know, your Slayer or your Metallica, or, you know, the kind of acts that have inspired these groups for quite a long time. So I'm really excited by what Power Trip is doing, and I hope more acts do what they do in this sort of incredibly successful way, because people have tried to do this before, but I think that this one really hits home, and it makes for just a fantastic listen. Really aggressive album that really just lets it all out, really dense, and it just weighs on you over time in a really fantastic way. Best tracks, Executioner's Tax, and maybe the final one, Crucifixion. Sure, let's go with that. All the tracks are great. I don't know. It's a really good album. So, that's, here we are. We're at number one. Wow, that took a while. Now, before I get to number one, I want to mention a few albums that, I don't know. Now, a few albums I haven't listened to, right? I wasn't expecting to listen to the Jay-Z album, but I did, and I liked it, because I wanted to listen to all of Jay-Z's discography before, but, that didn't happen. Things I didn't listen to all the way. I didn't listen to Flower Boy all the way through. I didn't listen to Big Fish Theory all the way through. What else? Revival sucked. Yeah. That's all I really have to say. I'm going through this pattern in the same way I'm going to do the games video, whether I have more to say about games I didn't play, whether than albums I didn't listen to. I tried to listen to a lot this year. So there's a lot of really good stuff that came out this year, and overall there weren't any like huge disappointments, except for the fact that the likes of Jake Paul are considered serious entrants in the music industry. That's not good. Anyway, number one is Thundercat's album Drunk. I freaking adore Thundercat. His first album, I mean, I went and listened to Drunk and loved it, and then I went back and listened to his other stuff. So I knew Thundercat because there have been projects where I've heard him playing bass or heard his contributions. You know, To Pimp a Butterfly had a lot of contributions from Thundercat. Flying Lotus and Thundercat worked together very closely at times. Yeah, so his first album was really interesting, and it's something that I guess you just didn't really hear that much at the time, but as the sort of R&B resurgence has come back in recent years, I guess it feels less original. But Thundercat has a unique tone to his singing voice, which I really like, and of course there's obviously his bass playing, which is a staple of a lot of what he does. On his second album, I couldn't believe that on the one track that he sampled Pong. Like, that's insane. But that kind of goes into, you know, his thing here is that he doesn't take himself too seriously. Instead, he just makes music that he likes, he thinks is good, and I also think is good, and it's just enjoyable. But I think on Drunk, I think that's taken to the not the extreme necessarily, but just to its logical, you know, climax, I guess. Because these tracks are really short, right? These tracks, most of them are in the 1 to 3 minute range, right? The longest track in here is 4 minutes, and they're like snapshots of, of moments, right? They're small moments throughout this evening or evenings that Thundercat is chronicling, which opens with "I feel weird, comb your beard, brush your teeth, still feel weird, beat your meat, go to sleep. Oh, I think I left my wallet in the club." Like, it's just drunken stupidity before falling asleep, right? There's another track on here called Friend Zone, which I believe is the single, and the song is literally, no exaggeration, it's saying, "I would rather play Diablo than be with you right now." Like, that just doesn't exist in anywhere else in the prolific music scene, and I freaking love it. And every song on here, the benefit to having these really short, snappy tracks is that you can have this crazy diversity within your sound for this entire project, right? So you have tracks like and I mean it's just but like it just has this crazy freaking bass line that's just like the entire song, and it's just phenomenal, right? Like if you didn't think Thundercat was good at bass, just listen to and you're like, oh, So that's great. But then you have songs like Jamil's Space Ride, or I'm trying to think of like the more softer kind of songs. Lava Lamp, I believe. It's the song, or is it a Fan's Mail? It's the one that "Sometimes you have to let it go." It's like these really like more chilled out, like laid back, almost like Drunken Haze kind of tracks, which kind of fits the theme, I suppose. But then there are more exciting tracks as well. So there's this crazy diversity within there that makes it such a captivating listen all the way throughout. And then I really like how at the beginning you have Rabbit Hole, which is like this intro to what's going on, but then the final track, right, kind of calls back to that original motif at the beginning, so it almost like loops back on itself, which I like cyclical album design like that. So just every track on this thing is fantastic. It's just a killer album. I really, really like it. It's something that I've listened to on loop consistently throughout this entire thing, especially later at night when I'm just like, I just want to go home. I don't want to listen to anything like super exciting, but it's something that you can just bop your head to and just enjoy the stupidity as it happens. And it's just musically incredible, incredible talent, incredibly well put together, but then lyrically it's just dumb enough that you just have to laugh and just enjoy it and take it in. So that's my album of the year. What was your album of the year? Was it on one of the ones I mentioned? Was it one of the ones I didn't mention? I don't know, but either way, good on you for listening to good music. And if it was music I didn't like, then good on you for listening to music you enjoy. It's good to you. It's all that matters. I'll see you around.